Okay, you should be able to see a screen that says your name on it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a template that I use. I won't need to explain too much to you because you probably know more about these theories than I do.
Right.
But this is your Batsa consultation. So Batsa just means 8 characters. We look at the 4 pillars of the year, the month, the day, and the time of your birth to extract information. And Batsa has very little to do with your desires or your, it's not destiny in the sense of we think of what's going to happen. It's more about, I think in the Taoist principle of just being more in line with your personal strengths and maybe inherent like struggles, just understanding them more, and then understanding how cycles of time are going to influence you, and then how you can use that information to affect your body, right? So your body would be the human level, Batsa or timing would be the heaven level, and then feng shui would be the earth level. So that's why they call it the 3 essentials. When you understand those cycles of time through the 5 element perspective, you can, work toward harmony, right?
Okay.
So yin and yang. I don't have to explain that to you. And the 5 elements. Yeah. So we look at the generating cycle and the controlling cycle for a lot of this information.
Yeah.
And then this is your chart. So you gave me the information that you were born on the 17th of December, 1972 at 5:35 in the afternoon in Pretoria, South Africa. Does that look right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Good. So when we adjust the time for solar noon, it's only 5:32, so it wasn't that big of a difference. Okay. And there was no daylight savings time at that time. So then we have a look at your chart. So this would be the year pillar, the month pillar, the day pillar, and hour pillar. And then you can, I don't know if you recognize these characters.
Some of them I do, yeah. Some of them.
Yes. So you were born in the year of the water rat, which you probably know. Yeah. You were born in the month of the water rat on a water horse day in a year, earth rooster hour.
Right.
So you have 3 of the 4 cardinal directions in your chart, which is very interesting.
Okay.
Explain. Well, one perspective we have of the cardinal directions is this principle called Tao Hua. Are you familiar with Tao Hua or peach blossom?
Peach blossom, yes, maybe, but just remind me.
So the peach blossom, everyone has one, and it's generally, they kind of think of it as like lucky or attractiveness. And when people have the Tao Hua in their own chart, they will be very appealing to other people. They'll be like a little more charismatic. So for example, your Tao Hua is rooster, and you have your own in your own chart. And so when you have your own in your own chart, that usually means in this aspect of life that this pillar represents, you are probably self-sufficient. You don't really need to look outside yourself. You will like that part of yourself, generally. And then if, for example, somebody's Tao Hua is rat, well, you have 2 rat in your chart. So these aspects of your life, they will be attracted to, or they'll find it easy to get along with you. So there are things in your chart besides this, but by having 3 of the 4, you probably get along with a lot of people, or people find themselves drawn to you. Yeah. And that can have positive and negative consequences. And when we get more into your chart, we'll talk about when and how that will happen.
Mhm.
But it's interesting because it's pretty rare to have, it's rare to have this many, and all of your branches are cardinal. So makes for an interesting life, I imagine.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster.
Yeah. So when we look at the chart, we look for interactions. There aren't too many interactions, but one thing that I'll just say here, you have 3 of these yang water all in a row here. And when you have 2 of the same character next to each other, we call it like, sometimes we call it like a super, like this is Ren, we call it like a super Ren or like a solid, because anything that happens next to it, say these 2 would interact, it would interact with all 3. So whenever something comes into your life that would interact with this character, it's going to make a very big impact in your life because it's influencing 3 of your 4 branches. And then again, with the rat at the bottom here too, being next to each other. So you don't have a lot of interaction other than this rat. I don't know if you remember, but the rat is representative of the north in the compass, and the horse is the south. So they're opposites. So they have an interaction called a cardinal chong or clash. So this horse here is going to be in opposition with the rat in these 2 pillars, and we'll get more into what that means. This is the strongest interaction you can have in a chart, and then the rat already being a water character and the horse already being a fire character, fire and water clashing is a very strong dynamic. So we'll also get into what that means. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we look at the chart, we are looking at the layout of the 5 elements, and then we assign them what's called the Shirshan, or the 10 spirits. Okay, and so each one has a representation of how they interact with a certain element, and then they have a yin-yang polarity. So the first thing we look at is this box here. This is the day stem, and it's called the Riwan, and your Riwan is yang water. So everything in the 5 element cycle is going to be relative to this yang water element. Okay, so when we look at this star here, we have the water on top, and this would be it's called the Tongwo, this is me, basically, right?
Yeah.
So this is B, which means that it's the same as this is yang water, and then this is Jietsai, which is the yin water. And I'll go more into what these mean, but I just want to get you familiar. I color coded them a bit, right?
Cool. It's interesting because I nearly drowned 3 times in water.
Yeah, you have a very interesting relationship with water. Yeah, and that was when you were younger, I imagine.
Yeah, and I've saved 3 people from drowning.
Yeah, you have a very strong connection to water. One thing we say about yang water, it's like the ocean, right? It can be, it's very dynamic, it's very powerful. But depending on how it's presented in your chart, it can either be really useful for you or harmful for you. And we'll go into how that lays out over time for you.
Okay.
But one thing you'll notice about the elements is you do have so much water in your chart, right? It's the most dominant element in your chart. You've got a little bit of metal, a little bit of earth. This bottom row is not equal to the top 2 rows. These are minor hidden stems, they call them, and they're like a small percentage of what these top 2 rows represent. you have a little fire, and you have no wood in your chart. So generally, what that means is, because we're always, even whether we know this stuff or not, we are just creatures that will look toward balance. I imagine that you are drawn, you're very drawn to water because it's your constitution, but then you're probably also, without noticing, balancing yourself with wood. And if you're not, then you should be. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing we want to know is, how do these elements stack up and how do they support you? So we're looking to see about these other 7 characters, how they support the day master, you can call it. Okay. So first we look at this place here. This is called the Yueling, and it's the month branch. And it's about as important as this day master in terms of what it can do in the chart. So obviously, this being water, water supports water, right? Then we look at the rest of the bottom characters of the earthly branches, and we see a water, we see a fire, and we see a metal. So 2 of the 3 are supporting, right? Metal supports water, water supports water. So we say that the D also supports. Then we look at the top, and we see that there is 2 waters and an earth. Okay, so again, these are supporting water too. So this means you are extremely strong in support for your water element. And then if we go back to thinking about the, the yin yang symbol, right? We know that when yang is at its most extreme, it's forced to change to yin, right? So when we look at, so you basically have a special kind of chart because you're so strong in your water element. Normally, if you had what we call a strong body chart, we would actually want to balance you with things that weaken you, right? But if we just look at your natal chart, because it's so strong, we actually want to make it even stronger so we can tip the scale, right? Force yang to become yin, and so to speak. Okay. But you have what we call a jia xuanwanga. Xuanwanga just means extremely strong. The jia means that you do have elements that over time can become rooted. So you have this fire that can become rooted here, and you have earth that can become rooted here. So if anything comes along and roots either your earth or fire, or if you get, somehow you get a rooted wood in your vicinity, that will flip your chart to a regular strong body chart. Okay. So people with this kind of chart, it can be, they have roller coaster lives because anything can come flip their chart, and the things that once seem to support them no longer support them. And then the things that seemed harmful to them, are all of a sudden good for them. And you have to go back and forth in life. And it's really hard to, I would say, like, these are the people who really can have a tough time building long-term habits over the course of their life, because basically your chart is changing. And we'll talk about how often yours changes and when it changes. So these symbols here, this says Yongshen, which means these would be the useful elements for you. Now this is when we're just looking at your natal chart. We haven't looked at you in time and space yet. So normally metal is useful, water is useful. These are Jishen, or harmful elements, wood, fire, and earth, right? Now, we don't want any element to be completely devoid. So even here where it's listing wood as a harmful element, I wouldn't say like you want no wood, because we want to have a balance of all the elements ultimately, right? It's just that in this model, metal would be more useful for you than fire, absolutely, right? And this
Mhm.
fire would be more detrimental to your metal through the control cycle, right?
Yeah.
But you have all this water to control your fire. Okay.
Mm.
And feel free to stop me if you have questions.
Yeah, it's interesting because as a kid, I would have had a lot of anger. So I was quick to temper. So I'm wondering, you know, with less fire, you know, I sometimes think that temper was kind of not really temper, but frustration. So I think
Yeah.
I was trying to generate wood,
Right.
you know.
And
Um,
you being so much yang water,
mm,
especially when you were a child, there's more water in your chart when you were a child. Water can
mm,
also bring on really high emotions and be
mm,
very temperamental. I mean, even if you just think of like a raging sea, you know,
mm, mm,
um, sometimes it's, you know, like we can think, okay, anger, frustration, that's wood, or, you know, like hot temper is fire. But
mm.
you can see in all the elements how different aspects of those emotions can come
Yeah.
through, right? I
The
mean,
other,
even earth people, like if they're a young earth person and they're a mountain, it's like they can be really stable, but if something upsets them, the whole mountain caves, right? It's
yeah,
an avalanche.
yeah. Other thing that people have said to me is that they can't ever get really close. So
Mm-hmm.
and they think that there's this kind of armor, but really I think it's what somebody said to me was, and this was before, you know, understanding any of this, that it's like a depth. It's like a very deep, deep, deep
Uh-huh.
river or a very deep sea. It's not that they can't get to me, it's just that it's so deep you can't see the bottom.
Right.
So
Yeah.
people try to, I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve. Very authentic. You know, I am very emotion led.
Yes.
But it's nobody really ever, no one ever really knows what's really going on inside me because it's so deep. It's so inside. You know what I mean? It's so far in. Even I kind of go to myself, what the heck, you know? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's worse than a rabbit hole.
So we can actually see that in your chart. One thing that these pillars represent are times in your life as well. So, you know, men, boys will grow in 8-year cycles, right?
Yeah,
So this is representative of the first 2 cycles, the year. This would be ages, you know, from birth to about age 15. This would be ages 16 to 31. This would be 32 to 47, 48 to 63, and then it would cycle back through again. And these would be generalized times of your life. This pillar will be more influential. But there are other pillars, as you'll see, I'll show you that cycle through time as well. But if we just think about how you were saying, especially growing up, how you felt, we can see there's a lot of water here, a lot of rooted water. And I'm gonna jump the gun a little bit. During this time of your life, your chart flips. You actually are only this Jia Zhanwan Ge, strong, extremely strong until about the age of 6.
mm,
After that, for quite some time, for the majority, I wouldn't say, like some years you might have changed or months, but I would say the majority of the time you become a strong body and this water becomes harmful. And water represents, these are your peers, these are people like you, these are how you can also see yourself or how you think people should be like you, right?
mm,
So you can, if you have this energy so much, it's generally what you think about most of the time. And I would say that this is where you would feel relationships or relating to other people or even to yourself could be challenging, because this becomes a Ji-shen, this becomes a harmful element, and you can even like metaphorically feel like drowning a lot of the time in the emotion, in how much water there is. And then especially because you don't have innately these other elements to balance it out, you would need a lot of outside influence to mitigate all this water, right? Because I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but the first 16 years of your life is just water, like so much water. And then at about age 16, 17, you start getting into a more wood time in your life. But we know that in early childhood, those feelings, that fundamental feeling is so important, right? So not only are these cycles of time representative, but these are representative of, they call this the community pillar. This would be your family, like nuclear family pillar. This would be yourself, or inside your home, or your spouse, or your friends, peers. And then this would be outside the home, or like your career, your kids, right? And so you can kind of see also from the Chinese like societal system, a year sticks around a lot longer than an hour, right? So it's this idea of where you come from, the people you come from, your larger community having a much bigger influence on who you are than what you do, right? So these aren't necessarily equal, even in that sense of how much influence they have in the larger part of your life. Now, from a Western perspective, we can flip it a little bit, and that's where it gets sometimes a little interesting and challenging doing Bonsa, because, you know, Western society, we're kind of like me first, but Chinese society, it's family, it's community, it's country first, right? So when we read this, we want to kind of take into account both of historically, how would they have intended this to be interpreted? But then also realistically, how do we really feel as people of the Western world? You know, where do we focus on, right? But I think that it's still important to take into account these two pillars in the sense of, this is our inner child, right? Like, this is how we develop, and then we spend our rest of our life figuring out how to make sense of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as you say, it's a guide. You know, it's a design. It's like, it reminds me of human design. This is your blueprint. This is how you operate. You know.
Yeah.
And it has a time frame on it as well. And you know, it like any operating systems, that have to change or be upgraded, or sometimes don't quite work in certain situations.
Right.
Yeah, it's super interesting for me, because water is actually something I struggle with, even though, because I have so much of it, I struggle to even drink water. You know? It's funny. I have a strange relationship with water.
Yeah. So we also say too, this top row, the stems, this is how people see you and how people project, how you project yourself to the outside world. But then this is how you see yourself, or what you aspire to be. So it's interesting because you can see, like, there's so much yang water on the outside, how people see you, how you may relate to other people. But I think what's really interesting is this bottom row is you have so much water, you have this yang water on the outside in the beginning, but inside it's more yin water. So it's like almost this dichotomy of, like, I always think of yang water as the ocean, and then yin water is more of like a mountain stream or the mist. You know, it's like your whole world was water, but there's this like, it's not lining up. You felt differently inside. You didn't feel as extreme as maybe other people perceived you, or as you came off to be, right? Like, you definitely have this more nurturing side growing up that just wasn't coming across, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
what's interesting is that when you get to your 30s, right? When you get to your adult, it's like, boom, completely opposite, right? And now there's this like clash, this cardinal clash, which is like the fire water dichotomy is like the strongest clash you can have, right? Of who you really feel you are with who you were. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it does, because in the 30s is when I started to take more risks.
Uh-huh.
You
Yeah,
know.
and the fire, the south, the horse is really about like expansion. It's really about like doing things, being more of a risk taker. You know, the horse is charging on the battlefield. Okay,
Yeah.
like when we think about the animals in the Chinese zodiac, whereas the rat is really about being resourceful, being careful. You know, they hide and collect things, and they're really smart and resourceful, but they're not, you wouldn't say like a rat is courageous or like going outside of itself. You know, it's about like being conservative, escaping danger, where it's like, boom, horse is like, I'm leading the battle. I am all about experiencing things, being physical, being out there, right?
Yeah.
And then what's interesting is then you transition to this rooster, where the rooster is more about it's about like the analysis creates value. So it's like, I think what you will notice when you get into your late 40s, 60s is like, you'll look back on your life and be able to make sense of like the polar extremes and the in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting for you is this metal represents this, they call it zheng yin, which is like it's like education or things that nurture you. So education, it can be religion or spirituality, but it's more of like the more formal. So I think it's really interesting because I know you're building this like school, right? And I see you really, when you get into the late 40s, 60s, and that time of your life, really embracing that and becoming, it's interesting because normally we don't think of like Qigong, Chinese medicine, as being a formal, like looked at as a formal education. We think of it as more like informal, right?
Yes.
But I see you saying like, no, I'm going to form, like this is going to be formal. They're going to be, it's all about like the in means print. So it's like about having like certification, degrees, like everything is in structure. Everything is, this isn't like a hand-me-down, family lineage type of education.
No.
Right? For you, it's like, it's more about making this recognized by more people. So
and it's
I
about
see that,
disseminating it and removing it's about not breaking, like still respecting all of that, but showcasing it as a complete standalone form of study, as a life tool, I don't know, I can feel it that's the direction I'm being drawn to more and more, because it's perfect for these times. It's a medicine that doesn't have any medicine.
Right. Yeah, I see that happening for you. And then especially just it just lines up perfectly with the age that this would happen for you, and then just this being the pillar of your creation, right? Of your career pillar. And you have this yin earth on top, which is also very supportive of that yin metal aspect for you. And it's when we think of yin earth, I think of it as like a garden, right? The more you put into it, you careful cultivation, and yin metal also being more like precision, right? This is definitely, you are going to take your time to develop and grow this and put in a lot of effort to make it. This isn't something you can rush through. You are putting a lot of detail into it. And we're going to also talk about when that's appropriate and inappropriate.
Okay.
and how to make the most of that tendency. Okay.
Yeah.
So we did talk about the day master, yours being young water, and I wrote some notes that we've already talked about a bit. So you can read over this later in the recording, or I can go over that with you. And then we talked about also that your constitution is water. And we talked about, the shifts in the age and everything. So you just also, I usually go over with people. I haven't done very many for other acupuncture, especially ones who are a lot more experienced than I am. But you just know that in your chart, if your water is your constitution, depending on whether that's Yongshen useful or Jishen harmful for you, those are things you're going to want to consider in your overall health. So water being so excess for you, you want to be mindful of those things transpiring, like in the Zongfu and the meridians, looking for problems there. And then also knowing that you're so deficient in wood means that even whether that's Yongshen or Jishen, I would recommend you really focusing on that element to nourish in your body, just for overall balance. Because I think of Bodza, I almost like think of it as epigenetics, right? Like you have this blueprint, but it's fluid, right? Like when you factor in what you do in your medicine and the environment, the feng shui of your life, you can find the harmony. It's not like, okay, this is it, you have no wood, sorry, right? Like you can bring it in through the food you eat, through the meridians you work with, activities, right?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
It was actually, I did a 4-year doctorate in Qigong. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done. There was 23 people in my class, and and I was only one of 4 that graduated.
Wow, yeah.
The dropout rate was massive. And you know what my final lesson was to sit in the group, and we did this type of meditation around the Zangfu, and my very last meditation was on wood. And my teacher, he's still alive, he's actually an ex-Vietnam veteran, and so much anger came up that this is the final class, and I went to pick up the chair and throw it at him to smash him. I wanted to smash him over the head, and he saw it come up, and he just smiled and he laughed and he went, "Yeah, that's all good. You've learned now." And I remember because I graduated 3 weeks after my father passed away, so there was that element as well, that it's been a challenge to like my head, the gallbladder meridian is constantly moving around, my head is constantly adjusting. I have challenges with my joints, especially my tendons, I've damaged a lot of ligaments, you know, through martial arts. I think the martial arts was helping me because there was a lot of twisting, a lot of stretching, a lot of dynamic movements. But my joints did get affected because they didn't have that extra kind of, you know, resilience that you would get, say, with bamboo. You know, the way bamboo is really strong yet flexible.
Right.
You know, I had a lot of almost too much flexibility, but no strength with that flexibility. So I can see, you know, for that first, I mean, definitely from, I would say 12 to 16, right up to maybe even 19, I was extremely powerful for my age, even though, you know, I weighed all of about 70 kgs. I was just dangerous, really, really deadly. And then it all changed. It's all, you know, all that is gone. And I used to always, funny, when I did all my qigongs and stuff, I always used to think I had too much wood.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it was not enough.
Yeah, it's more like the water's trying to bleed into the wood, and that was probably uncomfortable because of your constitution of water, but it's actually like healthy for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing, I did read something recently, and it was like interesting about the wood people, right? Where their anger can become passion. But it's difficult for people who are deficient in wood to translate anger into passion, right? So that could also be what you're feeling, like not knowing how to transmute that anger into like a useful emotion and outlet, right? So when it comes up, it's like it comes up and then it's gone, and it's like probably exhausts you too.
Yeah, and it's a very disappointing. It's really
Yeah.
disappointing, and it causes a lot of damage. I think the
Yeah.
martial arts was helped. That was the wood for me. That was bringing in.
Mm-hmm.
That was where. So I always feel. I mean, a student of mine looks at me and says my energetic body is more like an hourglass, and it's like that whole wood element is literally constricted. It's like, you know, and the center of my body is squeezed in.
Yeah.
And now I've started doing martial arts again. I've started doing Korean sword art, and right up to black belt, you just use a wooden sword. You're not allowed to touch metal. Just working with that wooden sword. I've actually bought another wooden sword. It's really just very useful.
Yeah, I would stick with the wood for now. I'll show
Yeah,
you why.
yeah. Okay.
Oh, well, we did talk. Okay, so we talked about your career a bit already because you had asked me about work and family a little bit. So we did talk about a bit of the hour pillar for you, and I didn't talk too much about the Shirshen. So I did talk about the Zhangyin of the yo, the rooster, and what that means for you. This Zhengguan is formal authority or responsibility, and for you that would be representative of power given to you, or it could be representative of somebody having power over you, like a boss or formal laws. And what that can mean there is it just depends on where Earth falls in your Yongshin Jishin, and it's gonna flip over time of whether you should be the boss or you should let somebody else lead you, or how you're gonna feel about it. If you are the boss, if that's good for you. There's like, we did an interesting case study when I was studying this of the newest Pope. What's his name? I can't remember his name now. Yeah, Pope Francis. And we did his chart. And I don't know if you remember, but he didn't want to be Pope. And that's because this Zhengguan for him was really detrimental to him. So it's just interesting, even though like, and he had a lot of it in his chart. So that's why he was so, such a good candidate. Like people could tell he'd be a good candidate, but he was like, this is not going to feel good.
That's interesting because I've been in a lot of positions of responsibility, you
Mhm.
know, and generally when I've had a good boss. I've had a really good boss, a boss that has been good to me, you know. And then when I've given responsibility for someone to manage something for me, it's usually gone
Uh-huh.
against me and caused
Yeah.
more. I'm happy being in charge, but at the same point, I'm at that point in life where there needs to be somebody to step in and do all the stuff that I don't want to do. You know,
Yeah.
I know what I'm good at. Um, it's a difficult one. It's something that I wrestle with, and I think whenever I've given people responsibility, they've ended up shafting me. You know, and in not
Yeah.
necessarily in a bad way, but sometimes my own undoing.
Right. Yeah.
And it's
So
like in my relationship with my wife, she is the boss 9 times out of 10. And, you
so
know, until we get to make a big decision, and then, you know.
so it's funny you brought that up because I didn't really get too much into that in your chart, but since you brought
Mm.
her up, this box here is representative of your wife,
Yeah, she's
or
a horse.
or at least not necessarily. This doesn't necessarily mean like who it's going to be, but it's going to be how you perceive the relationship.
Mm.
Um, and so it's interesting because I don't know what your family dynamic is. Do you have sisters?
No, my sister passed away before I was born.
Okay. Do you like have cousins or anything that you're close with?
I have a couple of cousins that I was very, very close with in the early part of my life, but
Okay.
we're very close, but we don't communicate often enough, if you know what I mean. Like, but we would, if I sat down with them, it's like being with a brother and sister.
Yeah. So these two boxes here can also like be representative of especially when they're in this part of your chart of like
Mm.
siblings or cousins.
Mm.
And so I was like, there's an interesting dynamic. Either this is a dynamic of representative of them and your wife, or just them and where you are in life now, of this like being completely different now. But yeah, you can see again this idea of formal responsibility. It's present in this. We call this the spouse palace. Um, every man. Let me just back up. When you go to the Shen um, positions in a chart, this this is you. This is your spouse, your wife, and then
Mm.
these would be your children.
Mm.
This would be your mother, and this would also be representative of your father.
Mm.
So it's interesting because the Zheng Sai is actually like very much representative of who the wife is, because there's two ways. There's informal and formal. So this is like very much a wife, where this would be like a woman who is not your wife. So um,
Don't
this
say
is so
that.
no, it's just I think like you really value a strong marriage and look for someone who
It took me a
also
long, 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 long time to find this person, trust me.
yeah. And it's I think that you really will put a lot of energy into cultivating your marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and then letting this person also sometimes be the boss of you.
Yeah, she is a horsewoman and she is fiery.
Yeah.
You know, she is a fiery horsewoman. She's red hair. You know, she rides these incredible animals. We're surrounded by horses. You know, it makes sense. It brings, you know, harmony. It's her outlet. It's her medicine, you know.
Good. You got the good person for you.
Yeah, trust me. Mm-hmm.
And it's good because she and I'll get into it, I think here we get into it a little more. She really tempers this water for you.
Mm-hmm.
She really helps balance that out, because one thing I alluded to is that your chart can flip. Actually, your chart has been mostly Shen Chong most of your life. I did like a lot of calculation over the next 6 months and decade of your life to kind of see when and how it changes. But for most of it, you are Shen Chong, or strong body, which means that water and metal become the Jishen, or the harmful elements, and wood, fire, and earth become the useful. Now, earth is only useful as long as metal is not rooted. Okay? If metal becomes rooted, this is no longer controlling water. Earth is no longer controlling water. It becomes a thoroughfare. It becomes what we call tongguan. So what means is that when it's nourishing metal, it's nourishing earth. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So we have what's called the Dayan, or the life pillars. And you're in a pillar right now of yin fire over yang fire, or this snake. Okay? And this started for you around March 2019. And what this means is that this is basically, we can see what your mind is going to be on during this time in life. And the big emphasis for you is probably going to be your money, your assets, your wealth. You're interested, you're focused on that. But also, it could be your wife too, and your marriage, because it's the same Shershen.
I actually feel it's both.
Yeah, and the ancient Chinese, wives were considered assets, so we can interpret that more romantically now if you want, but
okay.
So that's where that she brings value to your life, not just that you own her. So remember we talked about when all of these yang waters are next to each other, if anything happens to them, it'll happen to all of them. There is a rule though. The day master never transforms, and the Yue Ling never transforms, but they can still be involved in interaction, right? So this ding, this yin fire, when it's next to this yang water, it can produce wood. So we have this little line here saying that under the right circumstances, wood can be produced. Just looking at the natal chart and just looking at the Dayan itself, it's not happening until something in the calendar makes it happen. Okay? This snake and this rooster can also have an interaction where they can produce more metal, but nothing in the natal chart or the life pillar is causing that yet. All these things will happen in the calendar under certain circumstances. Okay? So I'm going to start with this month. This month, this snake does transform. You have, we are in a yang metal rat year. Okay, a gangzi year. And this month of September, and the Chinese calendar is not like September 1st to October 1st. It's usually like September 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th until October, one of those days. So it's a little bit off. But we're in the Yo month now. And it's a yin wood rooster month. But this yin wood and this yang metal, when they get together, they actually make metal together. So this is for everybody, but this is how it relates to your Shershen. Okay, this whole year has been mostly about this hasn't been a great year for you, because it has both of you. This is just not a good year. It's got two of your Jishen in it, and actually it roots it roots metal for you, right? So you can see this rooted metal.
Yeah.
Remember, and I said when that happens, earth becomes Jishan as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that means it's harder for you to get access to good elements, right?
Yeah.
Also, there's this September might be also quite a bit challenging for you, because when we have two roosters next to each other, and this actually happens for you every September, so it's probably not too out of the norm. What will change is just going to be the flavor of the month, which will be the stem. But it's interesting because you have so much yin metal transformation right now that, and we said for you, that is about the formal education. I can imagine right now is not the best time. You're probably thinking a lot about your career and this school, this education system you're building.
Yeah.
But it's like really taking its toll on you. It's just not, it's harder to make things happen. And you have what we call, where I put this little star, this is called a shing, which means a punishment. And when you have this kind of shing, it means self-punishment, which means you're probably beating yourself up a bit about work and about what you should be doing. So that makes it a little bit harder. The only thing that is helping to, you can't really escape that, there's no remedy for it, but how to negate some of this metal is fire, right? Because the fire controls the metal.
Yeah.
And you do have rooted fire during this decade of your life. And this is all about your remember we said like money or your wife or whatever. I would say that to help kind of temper this energy, put a little bit more focus here into the fire. And I'll leave it up to you how you think you should to nurture that fire, whether it's just through the Shirshan interactions, or the relationships you have with people. This will be help make you feel better when you have so much metal this month that also is resulting in this self-punishment where you're just beating yourself up and not not necessarily you're doing anything wrong, it's just kind of where your head is at. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like at the moment, so we're halfway through a training and I feel like I should have everything ready to go.
Yeah.
And I'm about 50% behind, but I'm trying very hard to focus in on the fact that the students that are there are a lot more patient.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's almost like I'm facing a trial to see, does this work? It's a testing ground.
Yeah. So I would say, and this just going forward in general, September's generally are going to have that feeling for you. So when you're thinking about your career, because it's representative of this Zheng Yin, and you know, what's interesting too is that it's metal, right? Like Qigong is a lot of, is like a pretty metal, I mean, it's like metal and wood. You know, I know there's like other things you can do within it, but a lot of it's tied to the breath, right? And movement. So
Yep.
we see that as being a very metal dominant activity. So I think when it comes to your business, try not to like do too much during this time, because you can have a lot of control about how the self-shing is going to manifest. If you say, I know in September I tend to beat myself up, like what do I want to beat myself up over? Do I want to try this new project that is going to take a lot of my energy and leave me totally defeated, or do I want to scale it back and then just maybe like from day to day go like, oh, I should be working more on this, but know that I'm working on something else that's going to be more beneficial to me? Because especially since this is Jishan, it kind of means that it's not as bad. Like there's no, like Dr. Tan would say, like there's no good, bad, right, or wrong, right? It's not really like that. It's just that it's not helping you achieve more balance. It's going to make you feel more out of balance, right? Because more of this metal just creates more of this water. And right now when it's Jishan, it just doesn't make you feel great, right?
Yeah.
But it's not to say like, okay, stop doing Qigong. Like, no.
No.
It's just how to bring more harmony into it. Okay. And then all year, like I said, this rat is just you've got 3 rats in conflict with this horse of yours. So I would say that probably a lot of things from your past are coming up to haunt you a little bit right now. Feelings of whatever you felt during this time or how you felt about yourself are coming back to make you question what you're doing now. That's just the feeling of the year. And you're probably, what's other interesting about this Jetsai is it's called robbed wealth. And so when it's Jishan, or it could be sharing wealth, it can mean that you are losing money. But Jungsai is all about wealth creation, whereas Piansai down here is, the Jungsai is about wealth creation. So you guys are talking about getting a house. When you see Jetsai and Jungsai, to me, especially when Jetsai is Jishan, that's a good time to invest. Because, and I saw Dr. Han do this. She had a year where she had so much Jetsai and she's like, I'm going to lose my money, right? Well, you can lose your money by buying things.
That's now where we're at.
Yeah, and you have this Jungsai rooted right now for a lot of the decade. And to me, that means that you can turn this loss of money into an asset. So I would say, this would be a good time to start looking.
Close.
Yeah,
very close.
And if closing this month, I think that would be good for you.
It's actually interesting because despite all the things that we have lost, like we've lost things financially and we've had problems with the house and whatever else, but my business is in a much better position. But we're in a situation now where we could invest in a property. It will require more money than we'd like to, if you know what I mean. So it won't leave us with much reserve, but part of us feels that this opportunity might be some time before it comes around again. So it's we're proceeding with caution.
Right. Yeah, of course. And I mean, I'm just looking at your chart. I don't know your wife's chart. So when you guys are making decisions together, it's like you have to take into account what's going on with her. If she didn't, if she had something completely different, I'd be like, well, maybe, careful. I don't know. Yeah. But at least for you, and I'm looking at this decade, is that you do have, and I did a chart recently for another person too. And I was like, everything's pointing toward buying a house for you. So hers had a lot more earth attached to it, which definitely made me say house. Yours is doesn't have that, but you have this aspect of the Jungsai and the Jetsai. And it's funny, you have that inherently. So I would say that you do have an interesting relationship with money, where you probably just innately, you are probably spending money on resources that you value as assets, but don't translate into cash money, right?
Yeah.
Actually, the S for you is representative of cash when it is not transformed. It's transformed this month. So let's see what October brings. October, I think the rest of this year is transformed. But you do get this Bing, which is cash in October.
Yeah.
So that's good.
That,
Actually, October might be better. Actually, I'm going to say
that's what we
October is
feel.
better because October has this earth element, but it also has
Mm.
Chisha, which Chisha for you is responsibility you take on.
Yeah. Well, our cut-off is the 15th of October for this.
Okay, so
So we're really
I
just
yeah, I would
delaying
say
it.
October would be a little bit better. Also,
Mm,
you have this hidden fire that's everybody's getting a little bit of hidden fire generated in October.
mm,
And for you, that's money. It has to do
yeah.
with money, and it has to do with you. Oh, that's so interesting. You losing money in relationship to gaining an asset and gaining responsibility for yourself with this earth element attached, which to me is like earth is very representative of the home and property and real estate. So, okay, I'm going to say October, which I think the month of October starts October 6th or 7th. Let me check my calendar.
The reason why you're probably not seeing cash on my chart is my wife is actually holding the money. So
She's got all
she's
the
the
money.
one.
Good.
Yeah,
You
she's
don't need
holding it.
you should not be holding the money. You lose it.
No, yeah.
October 8th is when this month starts. So I'll write that right now, actually. So you have it October 8th. Okay. So we get into the rest of the year. These are some of the dynamics. I just kind of put these in here. I didn't know if you had a specific question for like a date in general. November, I was also trying to see when and if your chart flips. It's still strong body through November. There's a little bit of a clash here.
What does strong body mean to you?
Oh, strong body means that so remember we talked about how does this support? Yeah. It just basically tells us which elements are going to be Jishen or Yongshen.
Yeah. Okay.
And this has been true for most of your life, is that you have this potential to have an extremely strong chart, but because of these impurities of the earth and the fire here, anytime they become rooted, you flip to strong body, which just means that these depleting elements are more beneficial for you than strengthening elements. So in November, again, wood is more beneficial, fire is more beneficial, earth, metal, and water are more harmful. Okay. Yeah. And you do get a little bit of wood created in November. I would say that, so this element here of wood, this is Shishen, this is productivity. So if you wanted to start a new project, this might be a good time to start a project. You also have some hidden wood being created in the month of November, which you do normally anyway, unless there's an interaction. You probably get a little bit more creative, do a little bit more work, feel a little bit more productive, like behind the scenes stuff in November. So anytime you wanted to start a project, I would say November is generally a good time for that. You do have a conflict for the decade between November and then your life pillar, which will be representative of like maybe friends and education. So I would say that in November, you sacrifice relationships or seeing people for the sake of your work or your spirituality or religion or self cultivation, right?
Yeah.
But I would say this November would be a good time if you're thinking of starting a project related to those things to start it in November. Okay. December, you got a lot of rat coming your way in December, so buckle up. No, it just means that, just be mindful of what's been going on here with the horse, right? And then what's been going on this year, and then December, it just being just quadrupled. So, yeah, it's just coming. There's nothing you can do to break that. It's just know that that's coming, and just, I would say, we talked about wood being the ultimate element for you. That would be a time to nurture wood in whatever way you can. Say nice things to your wife. Be careful about picking fights.
Yeah. I'd say it would probably be over family and what we do and where we go. And
yeah, I mean, it could be, in the holidays and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's interesting, and it's just a lot there. So, yeah, it's just something to be mindful of. January, we're still in the year of the rat, but for everyone in the world, when rat and cho get together, they transform into this earth element. And for you, it's that sense of responsibility, and it's rooted. So something about leadership, something about taking on a new position, something about even your kids. These can be your kids too, especially your, I think your daughter will be represented in this. So it could just be a time of that. But if we're talking about, your career, if you're looking to take on something, it might be happening. I would just be careful because it is still Jishan for you. So what you'll want to do is, if that's coming along, again, just make sure there's enough wood here to help. Well, it won't control it, but oh wait, actually it's not. Actually it's Yangshen. I didn't adjust that because no, it's still Jishan. Sorry, we're still in the metal year. That's why it's rooted here. Yeah. So something like that could be popping up in January, just because it's present a lot here for you. And then having it in your career pillar, I just think that there's something going to be popping up for you around that time.
Okay.
February, we flip for about 15 days. Maybe not every day, but for the better part of those 15 days, you're going to flip, where all of a sudden, all this water, all this metal, all this earth are going to be beneficial for you. So it'll be an interesting 15 days. There's also, for everyone, a lot of secret elements being produced of water, earth, and fire. We transition to the new year, the yin metal ox year. So I would say, like, during this time, plan for your job, your cultivation of this. You're going to have a lot of good energy around what you're building. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is more about the planning. This is more about like the study than actually like the execution or producing anything or launching anything. I wouldn't launch anything right now. Or like, this is about more of what you're making. And then this is more about what you're learning or studying, right? Generally, but because this is part of your career pillar, I kind of think the career you build is all about how it nourishes you. It's less about what you're making, which could be in the long run. If you struggle with income or making money from your job, that's why, is because you don't have a lot of productivity in your chart. This decade you do have more of the money aspect, so that's good for you, but it can be that your career is really like a vocation of self-cultivation, even for yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, but during these 15 days, that's really beneficial for you. So I would say anything that you are planning or thinking of wanting to do, this is the 15 days to really dive into that. because the energy really supports it during this time and supports you. Reach out to friends if you're looking to do that. This is a good time for that. You should be getting along really well with people at that point.
Cool.
But just be careful in February. There's another shing that comes in for you. This one is a small one. It's more about, it's called like an ungrateful one, and it's in your Jishan. So I would say it could be, I think you're just going to ignore the productivity and the making of money during this time. It's just, you're going to be so focused on this, it's not going to matter.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then at the end of February, it flips back. All the elements are still there. All the secret energy is still there, but it flips back. So just take advantage of those 15 days of you being Chuanwanga and let all of that rooted metal and water you have work to your benefit. And then I threw in March because March has Mao, which has a significant relationship in your chart. It's called a betrayal punishment, and you have it here. This happens every March for you, though. And it was probably really heightened this past March because it was a Mao Tse year, and so it was heightened for everyone. And it was very interesting because that's when, especially for most of the world, COVID kind of blew up, and everyone was like, how could China do this to us? How could our government, all this stuff. It was this big betrayal energy. It comes around for you every March. So I just wanted to talk about that for you. And then again, it just comes with the flavor of the month. For you, it's going to be about work. So you might feel like something goes wrong. You can harness, so one thing I learned about betrayal energy is that you can either be betrayed or you can be the betrayer. So it could mean like maybe you leased a space and you decide to break the lease, right? Like your landlord is going to feel pretty betrayed. Okay.
Yeah.
Or
That's
it could
probably
be
more likely what will happen.
yeah, or or it can go the opposite way where like you made an agreement with somebody and then they just like fall through and you feel betrayed in that sense. So it's just like, it's good to know. I think it's going to have something to do with work this time around. So just be mindful of that. And if there's something that you think is coming up and you feel like, oh, I'd betray that person, you might just have to dive in and let that energy play out. That's a thing about Batsa, which I'm learning, and it's really helped me this year, is that one thing about a Gangsa year that we're in now is that is actually a time for pandemics. Like it's actually, it's very much a time for when that would happen. And I was learning and studying a little bit about that, and it kind of helped me accept what was happening more as part of like, this is just a natural flow of time. Like, are there things about it that we don't like, that are inconvenient? Sure. But you kind of just like have to let things happen as they happen. And then instead of fighting against the energy of time, look for what you can make the most out of it. Right. So like, do you know, I think her name's Lillian too. She does like every year she'll do like a Chinese zodiac, prediction. Right. And so I do remember when she did this back in January, she was like, I think shipping is going to take a hit, and this is going to be a really good year for online businesses. And this was like way pre what anybody knew what COVID was going to be. And she did a recap, I think in April or May, they like asked her to like, hey, come back and like, explain what's going on. And she's like, Well, I did say shipping was going to get a hit. I didn't think it was going to be all the cruise ships were going to suffer, but like it makes sense. And then, you know, all this telemedicine, like online shipping, online shopping, like it's just grown this year because of that. So, you know, when you understand that, and I think that really encompasses the no good, bad, right, or wrong, is that there's a way to make benefits of what seems like terrible times, you know? And even in the chart, when it seems like, oh, there's conflict arising, well, that's when we get challenged and grow, right? And learn to thrive in conditions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just looking at the years ahead, 2021 is a yin metal ox year for you. Again, it's a lot about more of the metal element is rooted. It's still a Shen Chong. You're basically Shen Chong for the rest of the decade. There might be a few months where it flips or a few weeks at a time, but I would just say, unless you have a specific day in mind where you're thinking of, you know, I can recalculate it for you, but you can just bet on this being the theme of the decade. I don't think you get into a truly Shan Wangge pillar of your life until 2029. Oh, next pillar, sorry. So in 2029, you will flip for most of the decade. But most of your life is Shen Chong. So that'll be interesting, and we can revisit that then if you want. To plan on how to, you know, use that information. But again, this idea of formal education, formal religion, formal print, certifications is going to be heavy next year. And then this sense of responsibility coming in, and then maybe even losing a little money. So investing more in your business, investing more in leadership. This is not going to be an easy year for you. So you'll want to make sure to work on bringing these elements of wood and fire into your life to help you feel better.
Yeah.
Okay. 2022, we get the yang water, and we have a tiger year. And so again, this flips to some wood. Wood becomes rooted for you, which is good. It should be a very productive year. Have a little more money come into the chart. That's also good. I would say that this is like a 50-50 year for you. It's going to be better than 2021. I think you're going to see more growth in your business, but not like you're going to be more productive and probably have a little more income. And but you'll have this this Xing where you'll probably feel like maybe you're not making enough money, or you're doing a lot of work but you're not getting as much money as you would like. That's probably what's going to feel like to you.
Been there many times.
Yeah. But then in 2023, we do have a Xing year for you, and it does come in conflict with your career. So this can be a bit of a challenging year. This rabbit for you is representative of it can be like the rebellious energy or the loud productivity. Like this is a Shen that a lot of like actors or activists have. It's a time of really being a little bit more out there with your career, like being more recognized. But it's going to clash a bit with this idea of the formal education. And there's going to be a bit of betrayal energy. So I would expect there to be a bit of a shakeup that year in whatever you're building, or maybe you become a little bit more politically minded. I mean, we talked about wood also being the anger emotion, and it's rooted. So maybe something that's really like, I really hate this about this aspect of my country, or this aspect of my my field, or, you know, people in I don't know how like things are regulated for your career in Ireland, but maybe this is a time where you become a bit more active in the narrative there.
Yeah.
I would expect that to happen in this year, something like that.
Okay.
And you have a son, right?
Yeah.
How old is he?
He's 12 now.
12. Okay, so he'll be about 15 this year. You might expect a bit of rebellious nature from him. You guys might be butting heads this year.
Yeah.
Like or is it your son or your?
My daughter's.
Oh no, you know what? No, it's not. Never mind. Scratch that. It's it's not anything to do with your kids. Because kids for you are here. This is for women. This is kids. So, not for you.
Okay. So it could be butting heads against females in power.
Yeah, maybe. 2024, you get rooted wood, which is good for you. I would say this is going to be one of the best years of the decade for you, especially in productivity. You're going to be taking on a lot of responsibility. And you do have this element of money that's more dominant this year. And I would say that this is a good year for business for you, for building too. You're going to be a lot more creative during this time, and you're going to take on a lot of projects. 2025, it's a little bit more the same. 2025 is actually going to be even better. 2025, you're going to get everything you work hard for in 2024. 2025 should see you really get the recognition for your achievements, and really get the money. Lots of money. Good money.
Yay, finally.
Okay. Yeah. So just keep at it.
3 years later.
I mean, I definitely think like you're in a very building time in your life right now, and it's tough. Like, these aren't easy years for you. And then remember, this is all cycles of time. There's always ups and downs. So it's just learning how to cultivate it, how to like go, okay, this is going to be challenging. This is going to be harder. I have to go outside myself a little more, you know. This is the energy is just in your favor. You don't have to, it's not like you can do nothing. It's just things are going to come easier to you to do the things that you need to do to make you feel good. Right now, it's like you actually have to put energy into making things manifest. 2026, you again, money, woohoo, right? Lots of money in 2026. That horse is in conflict with this, but that's good for you. It's a little bit more even. The dynamic is balanced.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's going to be a good year for you. 2027, we again have some good money coming in. We have a trigger to transform this into some wood energy. Fire and wood's not rooted. Fire's rooted for you. So that's good. You probably take on some kind of leadership position that brings you recognition and money. So that's a good year for you. 2028 would be the last full year of this decade for you. We didn't talk about this symbol here is called Kong Wong, which means like void or death and emptiness, and it sounds really ominous, but basically everybody has one branch in their chart that is useless for them. It doesn't provide anything. Actually, that's good for you that this is the monkey. It's good for you because it would be metal. It would be metal, earth, and water, which are all normally Jishen or harmful for you. And instead it becomes nothing. It doesn't offer anything. It can't interact. It doesn't do anything. And when we first learned about this, a lot of people interpret it as a negative thing. But after doing a little bit more study about it, I think of it more as potential of like self-actualization, like a little bit more of where you have all these elements and all these shirshen kind of dictating what's at this like 3D level, right, of your life. The Kong Wong, if you can tap into it, can kind of help you ascend, right? It can, especially of what it was. And so that's interesting because it's like, for you, it would be Pianyin, it would be Bija, and it would be Chisha, right? It would be all these things of self-imposed responsibility, of spirituality, of things about yourself, right? That are dictated by these elements, of dictated by the history, dictated by the rules of nature and the rules and laws of the universe, right?
Right.
And now they're not. Now there's no rules. It can be whatever you want it to be. So I think for people who are not aspiring to that kind of transcendence, this can be very challenging for them because they don't like it when things don't fit into neat little boxes, right? And it can bring out maybe some darkness in them. But I think, and I've been kind of playing with it over the past year, I think it can be a like gateway for you, right?
Yeah, my sense of it is like a break. You know, it's like you're sitting in the middle of a storm, the eye of a storm, and you're just looking for an opening to leave.
Yeah. So
Retirement. Maybe it's retirement. Woohoo!
Maybe, yeah. And it's interesting because I talked about that being the last year of this decade before you transition to a complete shift of energy. And so I think that'll be an interesting year for you. And I think because I kind of know like you're into a lot of that self-cultivation of, you know, like moving beyond what we see in this world.
Yeah.
That this might be a transformative year for you in that sense, especially because there is this Chi-Sha here, which it is representative of power, responsibility you take for yourself. And it's going to be controlling you because this metal won't be rooted unless, you know, there's a metal month that comes along. So 2 months of the year. But I would say that it's going to be very, very interesting in how you grow during that time. And, you know, you can always look back because we go in cycles of 12, you know, what was happening the last monkey year, which was 2016, you know, like, so you can kind of think, all right, whatever was happening in 2016, which I think was a fire monkey. Yeah, it was a fire monkey year. It's just going to take on an earth flavor for you, right? So, but the interesting thing is this Kong Wong and how you're going to relate to it now as you've grown over the past 12 years. Okay. 2029. I think Well, in the beginning, up until March, it will be like this, but then I think you shift. I didn't finish the calculation on this one. But we talked about the yo being a self-shing. So, and that's just something you experience every rooster year. How you feel about yourself, but basically how you're going to feel about, I think, religion, or how you're going to feel about formal institutions or anything you're building in that way. I think there's something that will come up this year, but I didn't really finish this one because this is when your pillar changes. So I'm not going to talk about that too much.
Okay.
But that concludes the rest of your decade. We talked about, I've been playing around with something. I don't know if you know Christian St. Pierre. He is the teacher of Balsa, but I've been studying with him continually over the past year and learning how to use this information to translate into acupuncture. So this was a little acupuncture protocol we came up for you that would help enhance these useful elements. So so it's interesting. I would say, like, this could just be a constitutional thing when it's not really like a diagnosis, if it ends up like helping certain things in the body that relate to the meridians, right? Then great. But otherwise, if this is, I would say, like, this is like kind of a tune-up, or if you feel a little stuck, then this is going to help tonify the wood and fire, and then also not just the wood and fire, but the actual Shishan of Shishan, Shangguan, Piansai, and Zhengsai, these points, this point protocol. So I am still new to this and playing around with it, but since you're an acupuncturist, I thought it'd be fun. You want to try out the points and see how you feel, report back. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just looking at those points and their actions already kind of makes sense to me. Yeah.
Cool.
It's like the water has become a little bit turbid and needs a little bit of a cleanse. And that, to me, I feel like the pericardium is a big thing for me. It's like my I don't know. It's like my I can generate a lot of heat with my hands through PC8. So it's like tempering that just a little bit, conserving it.
Right, and cause like knowing from like how we use balance method, you needle this point, you transform the ow, right? So it's like it's really powerful in that way.
Very good.
Great. Do you have any questions?
No, I have so much information in my head. I have to I'll have to digest it first.
Okay, yeah, that's why I record this, because I know it can be a lot.
Yeah. Well done. You've obviously studied well.
Oh, well, thank you.
You have a good system.
Yeah, I enjoy this. This has been a really fun addition to my practice.
Yeah.
And I really like it. So I will send this recording to you.
Yes, please.
And I'll put it on the YouTube link.
Yeah.
And you can, it'll be unlisted. Nobody else will see it. Just you will have the link. And then you can, send me questions or comments like as time goes on, and we can talk more about this. And then if you are like, hey, can you look at a particular date? I can do a quick analysis or find a good date if you guys are like looking to make a big decision. That's how we can use this information.
Yeah, that would be useful. Do you believe that you can change your this code? Are you a believer that this can shift? Or do you think this is pretty much more the general path that's laid out?
I think that this is the general path. I do believe, and I'm going to tell you, I'm so new to learning all of this esoteric, like stuff beyond, but I believe that there are people who transcend their charts.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how.
I've met one person who did it.
Yeah,
I
I would say that in the past year, this idea of the Kongwang that I've been learning about and applying to my life. I think that's kind of one step in the direction of learning how to do that. But yeah, I think eventually, but I think it's kind of like you have to know the rules to break the rules.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, so you can't really transcend something you don't understand, right? If you don't know what you're transcending, you can't get there. So I'm still in the learning.
It's like the Matrix. It's like the Matrix. You've got to be able to see that it is the Matrix, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Before you take the right colored pill.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, Christian has studied this a lot, and I ask him a ton of questions. So I don't know. He's alluded to like there's bhatsa beyond life and how that, and I'm like, whoa. So I'll be the more I learn about that, then I will pass that along.
Yeah, cool. Great. Thank you so much for that. You've put a lot of effort in. I appreciate it, and I'll absorb it. And if something comes up, I'll let you know. And
okay, great.
Appreciate your time. And no doubt you'll probably see me floating around the internet anyway.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for letting me do this. This was fun for me.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm glad. At least my chart wasn't boring anyway.
No. No, it was a good fun chart.
Thank you, Lindsay. Take care.
You too. Have a good night.
We'll see you soon. Thank you.